My name is David. I'm from my company RF Shop in Adelaide. We focus on radio frequency technology, which basically means anything to do with wireless connections, and in this case, obviously, the focus is on staying connected as a caravan user. Now, many of us may ask, why would you actually want to be connected when you go on holiday or go away? And that's obviously a valid question, but the world is changing significantly. And with that in mind, there's a few scenarios that we believe, or that we actually see, specifically after COVID, has a big impact on the demand for internet as you go. Now, the first one is obviously entertainment. So we do see TV as obviously one form of entertainment. You get more forms, or increasingly forms of TV going through the internet as well. Streaming TV, Netflix, Stan, all those services, they basically run through the internet, as well as your TV on demand is also through the internet as such. The other big thing that we obviously, well, social media is the biggest one, I guess, that spending time on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube and so forth, that is an obvious example. And one that comes to mind specifically with COVID and beyond is people working wherever they go. It gets easier to work remotely. The workplace is changing into a remote workplace, and specifically in this case as well, internet is, of course, key to keep you connected. The other ones that are always there is going to be safety. When you go away, no matter what your family circumstances are, you probably want to stay connected in some way or form just to make sure that you can say what's going on, or if there's an emergency, you can at least get people to stay connected to you as well. Now, there's many ways to get connected, and I'll just list a few most common ones that we experience most of the time. So the first one is the cellular network. So that means Telstra, Optus, Vodafone, any of those networks. Where there is a network available, there is an opportunity to get internet connections. The other one, of course, is satellite. Now, it is something that is coming up more and more these days. So satellite connections, the most common one being discussed at the moment would be Starlink through Elon Musk. And NBN, I'm putting it there, NBN is a satellite service. It's probably not related to caravan industry, but it is a service that goes through the satellite system. And then it is very open to debate, what does your definition mean of being connected? Sometimes just having a VHF, UHF radio means you can be in touch with people. So in marine environment, for instance, VHF is something that is needed for the boats as they go away. So, but we're going to focus mostly on the internet connection as such. So the next thing to look at is really comparing Starlink to a router. So as I mentioned before, the two technologies are actually complementing technologies, but there's definitely some differences that you need to look at. The first thing is that keep in mind Starlink, as popular as it is right now, is really there to get you an internet connection. That's why we say it is specifically focused on data only, which means the internet and how you get it at home. A key thing to keep in mind specifically with the caravan industry is there's a lot of talk about the portability of the RV kit for Starlink. Now, having a portable solution is handy, but it does mean it's portable to the extent that you set it up now, you use it today, then tomorrow when you move to the next spot, you have to completely pack down your Starlink system and move to the next site again and set it up again. That's not mobile, so that is definitely a key difference between having a Starlink system or a system that is a mobile solution. As you travel from A to B and so forth, there's continued connections and opportunity for you to have access to the internet. A big thing, of course, is the cost. So Starlink itself is, as we all admittedly know, it is coming at a bit of a premium. So for the RV kit specifically, had a look last night, they run at 179 Australian dollars a month. So you do need to first invest in the hardware, and after that you also need to take into account that you have to have your monthly costs covered as well. Now, of course, the way that Starlink works is Wi-Fi, which is the connection to your multiple devices, or LAN, Ethernet connection ports as well. It has limited connectivity, and there is no way to really get that easily expanded further as well, which I'll talk about just now in the 5G routers. The one key thing with Starlink, of course, we have to admit that even in my industry, it is covering whole of Australia. So it doesn't matter where you are, you will have a connection available that can get you connected to Starlink. I think I didn't mention that I do have to mention, and specifically today it is getting pretty warm here and also back home in Adelaide, is the temperature. The thing with the temperature is you kind of want shade. And in a satellite system, shade is your enemy. So you actually need to be in an open space in order to get a good connection, to get internet connections. On a warm day, shade is not available. You have to stand outside. So take that into account just for practical purposes as well. Now, as opposed to Starlink, a 5G or 4G router, the difference there would be a router, first of all, is a device that gets you a connection to multiple devices. So, of course, with Wi-Fi, just many devices into the same device. That's the router part of it. But also in the cabled connections that routers often give you 4 or even 5 connections that you can cable in certain devices. Gives you potentially a more secure and reliable connection, say in your caravan where you have a TV or so that gets cabled in. Wi-Fi range is better. Now what I mean by that is basically that the router, I have an example here from the Teltonika 360. It has 2 antenna ports available that gets a Wi-Fi antenna. That's not a small feature, that's actually a big thing because those antennas are already outside the modem itself or the router. So that's a better connection to where you want your Wi-Fi coverage available. An additional feature that is very simple is you can put a cable in there and can put the antenna at different places where it makes more sense. So having better Wi-Fi antennas is a big thing because it means you have much more freedom to do something with your router to get a connection to other devices. Sealed units, consumer products, and also the Starlink devices don't actually have that ability. So there's already a bit of complication in Starlink where with a router, there's total freedom still to do what you want. The big issue with 5G, 4G is you do need network coverage. So you need a cell phone coverage of some sort. Can be very weak, but you do need something in order to get the Wi-Fi with the SIM card working well. What we do see a lot is Starlink with 4G and 5G backup. Now that is a really big thing because what you can do if you really have the freedom and the luxury of doing this is to use Starlink as a main system, as a backup system when Starlink is offline or when you want better connectivity or when you actually want better speeds in metro areas. You can have the 4G device as a backup. So it basically means you have best of both worlds. Starlink is running one system. When it falls over, it automatically would back up into a 4G connection. There's many network device manufacturers that actually support that feature. Now, the next thing is, of course, a device that gets talked about a lot, and that is a cell phone repeater. Now, the cell phone repeater, it's been about 6 years now, the Cell Phone Go, this compact version. Most important thing to remember, it's mainly really good in voice. So that's your classic way of talking to somebody on the phone. That service gets boosted and you can have a good connection through any cell phone that is on that same network operator. It's used for a lot of people who say, well, I use my phone as a hotspot when I connect to the internet. That is a good use case to use. The problem, though, is that it's not really the best option for data. There are many technical reasons for that. One is that you may have heard people talk about MIMO. Means multiple antennas, so you have 2 antennas to get better internet connection. A cell phone is one device. One device means you only have one channel coming through, so you're kind of halving the amount of throughput and data and bandwidth speeds, stuff that you can get through that. So that is definitely one thing to keep in mind. Also, an amplifier adds noise. Now, you don't have to be technical to understand if there is noise or ambient noise, it does complicate what the devices can do to actually get a better connection. A router, on the other hand, or just kind of as an alternative competitor to the same solution, it's quite easy to take this device and put another antenna on, as with the cell phone, so that is a similar situation. A modem or router is better for data. It basically is focused on getting an internet connection in. And if you want voice with the modem, you probably need to use some form of Wi-Fi calling, WhatsApp, FaceTime, those kind of services, but that is becoming more mainstream as well. Now, so just a good example, we have a few examples from our shop to run through here. The first one is the classic kit. What we try to do with the classic kit as an example is to keep it really simple. As you can see at the bottom of the screen there, it's not to give you too many options, it's really to give you that internet connection that gives you a good solution. The modem itself, again, that is the RUT360 from Teltonika. The speeds that it can handle is, just to explain, is about 300 megabits per second as a maximum. It may not be as fast as the Nighthawks, but it is still on paper 3 times faster than what the NBN service typically would be. So if your question is, can I do Netflix, can I do email, can I do web browsing, can I actually do some proper internet connectivity if the network is available? Absolutely. This kind of device, even though it's a classic kit, works phenomenally well for your good quality household type internet connections. The antenna that I show there is an antenna that goes on the roof, so it's really a ceiling mount antenna or roof antenna on a caravan in this case, but you can put it on even on boats, on trucks, on motorhomes, any kind of device. And it's just, it gets connected, it's permanently set up on the van, and then as you travel from point A to point B, wherever the tower is, you will still have the best or the similar connection to those specific towers and base stations that you go through. The one thing there to mention, it's a single network operator solution, and more about how other solutions have other options with the other modems. This one takes one SIM card, so it's either Telstra, Optus, or Vodafone. Potentially you can use any of the subsidiaries like LD Mobile, Boost, or so forth as well. This device would take one connection, and if that network is not available, that would be the drawback for this one, which brings us to the next kit, which is the advanced kit. The big difference with this specific model, it's a Teltonika RUT X12, would be it actually has 2 SIM cards, but it also has 2 modems. Now, there are many questions that people would have, well, 2 SIM cards means you can have an Optus and a Telstra, for instance. That is true, but what you often find is models with 2 SIM cards may have only 1 modem. It does mean if one SIM card falls over, like there's no connection anymore, it has to physically switch over to the other SIM, register itself to the network, and that could take time. You can't put a time to it, but it could be up to 30 seconds of nothing before you get the internet back. If you are in a Teams call for work, that is a significant outage. This specific example, that model has 2 modems. They're always on, so they're always connected at the same time, so there is a balancing act. So if one network operator just has no coverage anymore, it would be seamlessly just transferring all the information and the data that you're using through to the other one. You as a Teams user, for instance, would just have a connection going through. And then the last one is obviously there's all this big excitement at the moment with 5G coming up, and you could see there's mostly being talked about 5G going forward as well. That specific device from Teltonika is going to be formally available. It's hard to say, they've been saying that for a few weeks now, but hopefully next month we'll have this modem available. It is dual SIM, so you can have 2 SIM cards in there, but it is one of those that has 1 modem, meaning that you either connect to one or the other. And then it can be kitted up with multiple types of antenna options. You have this pointing antenna, which can be permanently mounted on the roof, or you have other kits as well. Now, the key thing for me, and this is my personal passion, being an antenna engineer by background, is getting the right antenna. And it's probably the biggest topic that you can follow in terms of getting a good connection to the internet, because that's where so much happens, is with the internet itself. Because that's kind of, as I call it here, the frontline worker. It's the first connection to the internet. There are 2 definitions there, omni or directional. So omni antenna is an antenna that is omni. It basically, you put it on the roof and it can have a signal or coverage in all directions. So if you're traveling, if you're parking, wherever you are, it doesn't matter. It kind of has equal performance in all directions, so you can have a connection. The directional is an alternative way to do this. That would be something that you have to set up every time. And I think about TV antennas at home, for instance. Always faces in the same direction. So when you're traveling, you need to make sure this is always facing in that specific direction. You get a better connection because typically with the type of technology you have with the antennas, you can do more in a directional antenna. So you can have a stronger signal in that direction. It will be weaker in other directions. The downside will be that you need to set it up every time. So it's probably not that bad, 5 minutes. But if you are willing to do that, you'll have a better connection. If you want to keep it really simple, keep something simple on the roof and just travel around with a system permanently in your van or your home, your motorhome or so forth. Now, what is MIMO? This is kind of a loaded question which can't be answered in a very basic term, but the simplest example to say is it's a difference of stereo or not having stereo, for instance. You get more information, you get more data that you can actually use, which translates to users often to better speeds, better quality of the connection, and that's something to keep in mind. If you use one antenna, it's not MIMO. MIMO meaning multiple. So you use one connection. So there is a limitation in not having that kind of capability. That's where modems and routers are quite powerful if you have two good antennas. Now, one of the models that we talk about a lot in our case is the pointing MIMO 3 antenna. It's that antenna that looks a bit like a shark fin that you can put on a roof. There are many models, and there are many models that have more and more features in them, like 2 antennas, 4 antennas, some Wi-Fi antennas. And we see a lot of people just wanting to smash as much as possible into the package. I tend to tell customers, don't do that. You want to get the right number for what you want to do, but if you put more in, it's pretty much like smothering the other one. There's a lot of interaction, and the more you complicate your package, the more you may complicate the overall connection that you may have. So try and keep it as simple as possible. And then the last one there is Yagi. It's a type of word, it's a type of antenna. It looks a bit like a fishbone that in normal language, people are familiar with that. So we would get the question also, why can't I just use a Yagi antenna? There's so many technical reasons why it is a good antenna for one application. But if you're traveling around, there's so many different circumstances. The antennas are normally bigger, they're bulkier, and they are very focused in one specific application only. So it would be good if you have a fixed setup. But if you're moving around, that type of solution is too single-minded, I would say, actually, for one specific application. So keep it simple and go for a generic solution that is good quality. One typical thing that we can also do is we see a lot of people having that example there. It's the Telstra or the Netgear Nightbook. It's just a name that gets used a lot in the industry. You don't always have to buy a full kit. If you have your own modem, maybe a smaller one, maybe an older one, there is often, actually more often than not, an antenna port available. So in that case, you can upgrade it with an antenna. So you can add an antenna to your van. You can add an antenna to your home as well and fix what you already have. So if you have a modem, you don't always have to go for the complete kit. You just get an antenna that gets you that solution. And then basically you fix the problem of having a good connection outside and bring what's out there into the actual device itself. You see people having both options. As I mentioned, you can have an Omni for when you're traveling, and then you can have an antenna that focuses as well. One thing with us, we always offer custom cables, so no matter what company or what application it is, if you want longer or shorter cables, do keep that in mind. It is possible to change the cable length if you have the right setup and the right tools. This is an issue that we see, and it comes up a lot, is the actual application and installation. And when you buy a new van, I think the last thing a lot of people want to do is drill a hole in the roof as the first thing once you receive your new van. So there are brackets available, but the thing is the antenna placement is key. And just a week ago, before we came here, well, we're from Adelaide, we had a customer who just got a van from a manufacturer, and they have a very nice long Omni antenna, but it was installed right next to the van. So basically there I have the no-go. There was an antenna from the base up along the Caravan. So he was saying, well, it's not working. So probably not going to work because it's right next to the actual structure itself. And that's the key thing. Antenna needs to be as high as possible, above, on the roof, clear of as many obstructions as possible. Now, I guess as an antenna engineer, I often tell people, try and stay away from the aircon. Stay away from anything else. The reality is it's not always possible because you could see a lot of the vans, they get busier and busier on the roof because of all the solar panels and aircon and whatever else they could be on there. So at least try to be clear, and you do see brackets, so there are companies available that actually give you brackets that lift the antennas a little bit, so you can have clearance from, let's say, solar panels have a, I don't know, 15 centimeter height, so try and be a little bit above that, gets you that freedom to have the elevation. One thing at the bottom, very important, height is your friend. That's the positive. The negative is cable length is not. So don't go just longer and longer cable just because you want the antenna at a certain place, because cable will actually cause losses in the system. You don't want that. So it's kind of this you have this to and fro. You say, I want my antenna far away, but I need the cable short. The balancing act is somewhere in between. So best is to talk to an expert and then see what you can do that works best between the two options. Typical questions we get, there's many more, but there's just a few that I could think of when I prepared the slides for customers that come to us and ask these type of questions. I just want to run through them quickly. How fast will this make my internet? It's almost impossible to answer that question because what is fast and what is the definition of fast for whatever user it is? It will improve the connection, But when we look at the numbers, we look at, say, how powerful is this, that the internet connection coming in. If that translates to a very busy tower, you can have a good connection, but if the tower is busy, there's not going to be faster internet, but it will be more stable, potentially. So we can't put a number to the speed, because the speed depends on your connection and also what the network operator and the network looks at that specific point. Why is this device slower than others? And I guess here I'm specifically thinking about some of the solutions we see through Teltonika. That there are so many different ways to design products. Somebody could build it with the intention that it's robust and strong. Somebody would buy it or build it such that it's actually the fastest and latest and greatest. There's always a balancing act. So if you are focused more on speed, then a consumer product such as the Nighthawk is probably going to get you really fast internet speeds. But that's when you do a test. And when you use it, it might be a different case. So speed, again, and why is the device slower and faster? It's a very difficult one. Probably want to look specifically at your setup where you are. How far will this antenna go? That's a classic question we get so many times. It's impossible to answer. We know what can be done. So if you say an antenna has a certain number better, 6 dBi is a good number. Typically, in perfect world, 6 dBi extra means double distance. But that is if you have absolutely perfect conditions and there's no obstructions in between. If you have a mountain just behind you, it's not going to be double, because you might be here between me and the place. There's a 60-kilometer range and we have a good connection. You get a much better antenna, but suddenly there's a hill behind me. That's going to mess up that calculation. So it's very hard to say how far an antenna will go. We can say how much better it would make the parameters, but overall, it's stability. It's not just going further and further. It's also the quality of the connection. Now, this is more me actually asking and telling you what's the future of 5G in remote places. And I think this is awesome. To be honest, at the moment, the 5G technologies we see is mostly focused around metro areas. But Telstra and Optus have purchased spectrum, and that's going to happen next year for lower frequencies, which means in remote places, rural places, it will come into play. Devices such as the Teltonika 5G router are ready for that. So 5G is coming. It's not just a pie-in-the-sky solution. It is the technology that's going to make the cellular networks relevant again. And it's probably going to kind of really smash the performance compared to Starlink as well. Can I use my UHF antenna? A lot of people have UHF antennas. The problem is many manufacturers would use exactly the same mechanics. So if you just look at it without looking at the label, you have a UHF antenna, which is for your walkie-talkies, and you have the same brand, looks exactly the same from the same manufacturer, but it happens to be a 4G antenna. Inside, it's completely different. So there's no correlation between the two. The short answer is no, you can't. It's a different antenna. It may look the same, but it's completely different inside. Is it easy to set up? Per opinion, probably. It's very easy to set up because it's an antenna, there's some cable, and there's the modem. Setting it up inside your van, that's the complexity, but the actual setup itself and all these technologies these days are getting easier and easier to set up. So if you can connect Wi-Fi, if you know how to set up and change your Wi-Fi passwords, typically that's how difficult it is to get these devices up and running. Will this also work for my phone? That's a difficult one. I mentioned earlier, it depends what your requirements are. If you say I want a repeater, then a router is not the device. But if you want just internet connection, your phone has Wi-Fi to that, yes, then that would work. Now, many Caravan accessories available. So I'm running through some examples, and this is just getting more and more relevant these days as we see the Caravans come through. SMA adapter plate. Now that is basically one of the questions. How do you get an antenna from the outside and have a connection to the inside? Now there's a little wall plates you can get and just have a neat connection on the outside. Plug it, make it waterproof, have a connection to the inside. In this case, for the Teltonika specific routers, there would be power cables available, many different types of configurations. A battery backup is an option if you ever have the scenario where you don't have power, you just want to have a connection going. And it's certainly one quick comment we get with a net gear is it has a battery, so that is a thing that gets taken into account. But with other modems as well, you can always connect a battery. RMS is a remote management system. Now, maybe not for the individual users, but it is a feature that can be used if you are renting out your caravan for some other users. There is a way to actually have visibility of what the health and the status is of your connection as well. Tripod, that directional antenna, so if you are the kind of user that wants to use a solution where you say, I want to set up now and I want to set up later, there are tripods available. We have one on stand at booth 27 as well if you just want to have a quick look. And then magnets, so if the antenna needs to be on a van or car, put magnets at the bottom for the antenna to be used now and then placed somewhere else. Just as some closing statements, why RF Shop? So it's really just to summarize what we do, we're an online store. We run with pointing antennas and also Teltonica routers. So pointing antennas is a, surprise, a South African company. They provide antennas to all sorts of industries, and caravan industry is one's focus as well. Our passion for us specifically is YouTube education, so this technology, but all sorts of where things are going, what is necessary, how to understand this, trying to make it as simple as possible. That's why the slogan at the bottom, keep it simple, keep it real. We have stock in Lonsdale in Adelaide. As I say, passion for the cause, pretty much trying to share education, share the knowledge, get the technology and the opportunities for cellular connectivity to get more appreciated for what's going on out there. And then custom coaxial cables and connectors. So we do work for a lot of applications that uses cables, not just in the caravan space. If you need any help with that, do come to us for support. As far as antennas is concerned, as I mentioned, Pointing Antennas is an antenna company. They focus on all sorts of rugged and fairly high quality antenna solutions. They have a good reputation. They are very heavy focused on the US and European markets and also growing in the Australian market as well. They have experience in rugged applications. There are some videos, so you can show it. I could show you at our booth as well. They actually smash a hammer into that specific antenna and it still survives after quite a few knocks. And then because of our antenna focus specifically, we have a lot of technical support that we can offer through our, basically our technical team, our antenna team at the workshop. And then White Teltonica routers. They are a European company, so they have a growing footprint as well, making inroads in IoT and also in the caravan space. The quality is robust, so the temperature range, the power supply range, so forth is quite wide. Widely deployed in Australia, not just in the caravan space, but many other applications. So in terms of coverage for support and so forth, there's a significant network behind it. And then, of course, the remote management is quite a significant feature for many applications. The last one that is really interesting is input and output for caravan control. So if you look at the power cables at any stage, you'll see there's actually 4 connectors and not just 2. There's an input and an output, and it's a silly thing, but the input means that you can actually remote a information in so that it can switch it on or off, and remotely as well you can actually have something monitored. And just one of the examples would be, is your caravan door open or closed? Or when you're getting close to your campsite, you can already send a text message to this device to send a signal to the aircon to say, start to cool up my caravan before you reach the actual van. And that's really, let's see it. Here we go. Follow us on YouTube. Having more fun on YouTube as well. Thank you.
Before we go on holiday,
we like to go on holiday to the Victorian Caravan Camping and Touring Supershow for the latest and greatest of everything.
Let's get going.
Melbourne Showgrounds, February 22 to 26. Tickets online, proudly partnered by Truma.